Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are wrestling with a role that is undergoing, well, one of the most intense, high-stakes transformations in modern business. I'm talking about the Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO.
Right.
For years, this was a deeply technical job, keeping firewalls up, patching servers. But the sources we stacked up for you today, they show that the traditional CISO is, frankly, obsolete. This role is moving from a siloed defender into a core, an existential strategic business imperative.
It really is an unprecedented moment. When we look at the source material, the job description of the modern CISO is now defined by, I think, three big forces all working at once.
Yep.
You've got geopolitical volatility, technological disruption, and systemic cyber risks. That old model of the CISO as like a technical gatekeeper who just manages security tickets, it's just not sufficient for business survival anymore.
Not at all.
It's a total redefinition of leadership.
So what does this new, really complex mandate mean for you, the listener? Our mission today is to unpack exactly what the modern CISO has to do, what critical executive misalignment is happening at the very top, and what new leadership skills are required to actually protect the business.
Yeah, and many of those are surprisingly soft skills.
Exactly.
And look, navigating a landscape like this requires both internal strategy and some really solid external partnerships. So we want to thank our sponsor, www.cisomarketplace.com, for making this deep dive possible.
And we should crucially mention their offensive security arm. That's www.cisomarketplace.services. They play such a key role in helping organizations proactively manage this unrelenting risk we're talking about.
That proactive piece is vital.
It really is. They give CISOs the strategic insights to, well, rationalize their threat landscape, which is something we'll definitely get into later.
Yeah.
It's the exact kind of strategic thinking we're about to jump into.
Okay, so let's unpack the external forces driving this change, what we're calling the pressure cooker.
Good name for it. The first major, I think, unavoidable factor is that cyber risk is no longer just about software bugs.
No.
It's about geopolitics.
That's so right. Geopolitical tension now influences the cyber strategy of nearly 60% of organizations. And this isn't some, abstract theory.
Right, it's
It's driven by the very real escalation of state-sponsored cyber threats and the rise of advanced persistent threats, or APTs. When you have nation-states sponsoring sophisticated attacks, your security team is, they're essentially fighting a military-grade adversary.
And what's fascinating here is how these huge global tensions, they actually turn into very real, very technical implementation headaches.
Oh, absolutely.
Specifically around what the sources call the fragmentation problem.
Yeah, the data sovereignty debate.
That's the one. Because of all these debates on who gets to store what data where, systems are becoming increasingly fragmented regionally.
And if you are a CISO for a global company, this fragmentation is a huge operational barrier. Think about it.
Why is that?
Because it severely hinders your ability to aggregate data to detect attacks. You lose that central visibility.
You can't see the whole picture.
You can't. Not if your data is siloed in a dozen different regions because of legal requirements. It creates blind spots where the most sophisticated threats can just hide.
And on top of that, those tensions lead to regulatory divergence. The sources point out that all this friction results in, quote, diverging regulations across regions.
Which is just a massive, relentless resource drain.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Think about the time and money involved. CISOs are forced to devote significant resources just to managing these layers of compliance levels. And you're sometimes dealing with opposing requirements,
Like what?
Region A mandates data stays local, but Region B mandates you share it across borders for central visibility. So your security teams are spending a huge amount of their time and budget managing bureaucracy, not purely focusing on reducing core risk.
And that's all just the external political pressure. Internally, the CISO is also battling the velocity of change, the business demand speed, right? Rapid innovation, constant code deployments, but good security remediation, comprehensive threat modeling, that takes time.
And that tension creates one of the most dangerous concepts in our sources. Shadow risk.
Shadow risk? What is that?
It's where speed wins out over security. Code gets pushed to production without any CISO involvement.
Oof.
And when that happens, you instantly create blind spots and unanticipated exposures that bypass every single security control you've put in place. The business wanted to move fast, but it moved fast straight into danger.
And finally, the threats themselves are just dramatically more organized. We're so far past the lone hacker in the basement.
Oh, worlds away. We're dealing with what the sources call industrialized cybercrime.
It's a business.
It is a full-on commercial enterprise now. The threat landscape has matured from these isolated, skilled actors to organized criminal groups that operate like businesses. I mean, they have hiring, HR, sophisticated supply chains,
Wow.
including things described as scam farms. This scale is why cyber risks have risen for a whopping 72% of organizations, driven by things like phishing and identity theft. The sheer volume is what overwhelms traditional defenses. So this extreme, incredibly complex environment, it forces us to go back to basics and, really define the CISO's core mission.
Right.
The fundamental obligation, despite all the complexity we just talked about, is simple in principle,
Which is
to protect the business itself.
And that distinction is so vital, isn't it? It's not just protecting the company's digital assets.
No.
It's protecting the organization's ability to function.
To make money.
Exactly. The ultimate goal is ensuring the organization can continue to deliver to its stakeholders the products and services that are core to the purpose of that business.
So security isn't a destination. Never. Security is not a state you achieve. It's an unrelenting exercise in risk management. You never, ever hit the finish line. You just keep managing the next threat.
Okay, so here's where we hit a fascinating point of friction. And this goes back to our executive audience. The Global Cybersecurity Outlook 2025 survey highlighted a really critical executive gap in perception.
I remember this part. It was striking.
It was. Nearly twice as many CEOs than CEOs identified brand damage and loss of customer trust as their top concerns.
So why the disconnect?
That's the question.
Well, this misalignment suggests that many CEOs who are, focused on the quarterly report, they're still prioritizing immediate operational and financial metrics.
While the CISO sees the bigger picture.
The CISO sees the existential long-term threat to reputation. They realize a major breach doesn't just cost money in the short term, it can destroy the entire value proposition of the company.
Let's use the analogy from the sources here, because it makes this idea of trust so tangible.
The cruise ship captain.
Yes, the captain of a cruise ship. The CISO is like the captain, sailing through hostile waters. The captain knows that a single scary incident, a near miss, a loss of power, even if the ship is structurally sound, will instantly terrify the passengers.
And if the passengers are terrified, they're not coming back, and they'll tell everyone they know not to sail with you.
Exactly.
The captain understands that trust is the most fragile cargo on board. Once that trust is broken by an incident, it is incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible to repair, no matter how many technical patches you put in place afterwards.
Right.
And that fear of losing market confidence, of losing customer loyalty, that's why CISOs prioritize reputation so highly. It hits the bottom line faster and deeper than a purely technical failure often does.
So given all this pressure, you have geopolitical friction, organizational misalignment, industrialized crime. The CISO role has to make this profound strategic pivot.
It has to.
We're talking about a fundamental shift away from a siloed technical focus. The modern CISO is now expected to be a business strategist, operational risk leader, and trusted advisor.
That's 3 massive jobs wrapped into one.
It really is.
And the analogy for this transformation in the sources, it just nails it. Think of the traditional CISO as the fire inspector.
Okay.
They walk through the building, they check fire extinguishers, they ensure compliance, and they say no to prevent a specific known disaster. Their job is prevention by checklist.
But the modern CISO
Is the city planner.
the city planner. I like that.
They don't just prevent fires. They design the entire city infrastructure to be resilient and to enable safe, sustainable growth. They negotiate with developers, they make sure traffic keeps flowing even during an emergency, and they balance safety with the high velocity needed for commercial expansion.
So the city planner is focused on systemic health and future growth.
Not just current compliance, exactly.
And to get to that systemic health, the sources outline 5 key strategic imperatives. They call them the building blocks of cyber leadership.
And the first one is strategic business partnership.
That means moving past that old reputation of being the department of no.
Oh, that's a hard one to shake.
It is. The CISO has to operate with a yes and mindset. You want to deploy generative AI? Yes, and here are the security guardrails we need to build around it to enable safe deployment.
And this is critical because, what was the stat? Only 37% of leaders currently have processes for safe AI deployment. The CISO has to guide that innovation, not just block it.
Right, the second ply.
Becoming the resilience guardian.
Okay.
Since we know 100% prevention is a myth, the focus shifts entirely to resilience, the ability to withstand business disruptions and recover quickly.
And this role expands way beyond just the IT network.
Far beyond. It often encompasses what's called enterprise resilience, which can include operational technology, OT, physical security, even linking up with teams focused on financial crime.
So the CISO becomes the unifying force that makes sure the business can take a punch and get right back up.
That's a great way to put it. The third block is maybe the most transformative.
Which is?
Being a cultural driver. This is where the CISO becomes the architects of security-minded organizational behavior. They have to shift from being the cop who enforces the rules to being the mentor who embeds the value.
And success is measured differently then.
Totally. Success is measured by making sure every single employee sees themselves as a steward of digital trust, making security a shared value across the enterprise.
So it's not just about that mandatory annual training that everyone clicks through.
Not at all. It's about changing the mindset. So the person pushing code, the person replying to an email, the person handling client data, they all feel a personal ownership stake in that security.
It's about distributed accountability.
Precisely. And that requires the fourth block, being a people leader.
Because you're battling that huge global skills gap.
A massive one. Estimated to be between 2.8 and 4.8 million unfilled positions. This needs real leadership focused on nurturing talent, developing soft skills like empathy in your team, and crucially, preventing burnout among existing staff who are constantly under fire.
It sounds like the ultimate tightrope walk. You're trying to build a team while you're simultaneously leading a war.
It is. And finally, the fifth block, the operational rationalizer.
Right. Even the city planner has to make sure the budget is being spent wisely.
They absolutely do. And this tackles the eternal problem of tooling complexity. CISOs often inherit this confusing pile of overlapping security products.
So they have to simplify.
They have to simplify the technology stack to reduce inefficiencies, alert fatigue, and increased overheads. It's a budget discipline exercise. They have to ruthlessly get rid of tools that aren't being used properly.
And this is where that strategic partnership comes in again, right? Like leveraging services from our sponsor, www.cisomarketplace.services.
Exactly.
If you can rationalize your external threat perspective using offensive security, you can then justify streamlining your internal defensive stack.
And you can reallocate those resources away from redundant, frustrating tools. It's about building a smarter defense, not just a bigger one.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving into the CISO's most critical operational tools for success. First up, prioritization is paramount.
It has to be.
Since you can't secure every single asset equally in this fragmented, high-velocity world, the CISO must first define the crown jewels.
And the crown jewels are not just all the data.
Not at all. They are the organization's critical assets, the components that are absolutely necessary to deliver those core products and services that define the business.
So securing these jewels protects the value proposition delivered to clients.
That's it. It means aligning every single security dollar directly with what the business is trying to achieve. If you protect your core functionality, you protect the business's ability to survive.
This brings in the museum curator analogy.
Right, the museum director.
The curator's focus is specifically on the masterpiece exhibits, the Mona Lisa, the Hope Diamond, not every single storage closet.
A threat to those critical assets creates an immediate existential crisis for the museum's reputation and its revenue. Locking every door equally is just a fool's errand.
And once you know what you're protecting, you have to be able to talk about it.
Yes.
So the next essential tool is the CISO as storyteller.
This is such a critical leadership capability, and the sources really highlight it. It's about bridging that massive gulf between technical jargon and business language.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, if you just hand the board a raw data spreadsheet full of vulnerability counts and zero-day threat levels, their eyes will just glaze over.
They will. They don't speak that language, and they can't make good fiduciary decisions based on it.
So the CISO has to translate.
Exactly. They have to translate technical status into a strategic narrative. They have to present risk in terms of financial exposure and reputational impact, not just technical status updates.
It has to be clear. If this control fails,
the business will lose X amount of revenue and Y amount of market trust. That's the language they understand.
The sources even emphasize that qualitative metrics can help tell a story and demonstrate impact better than quantitative ones can.
Because it's about building a coherent picture, not just dumping data on them.
Which is perfectly captured by that foreign correspondent analogy.
Yes. The correspondent, the CISO, is on the ground in the chaotic foreign war zone of the cyber landscape.
Right.
They don't just send back a list of coordinates or casualty figures. They translate the chaos into a coherent strategic narrative that allows leadership back home to make high-level decisions about budget, policy, and strategy.
That translation ability is what separates a technical manager from a real strategic leader.
So to synthesize this whole deep dive, this massive transformation of the CISO role, success today is no longer about technical mastery.
Not by a long shot.
It requires influence over the organizational hierarchy, it requires collaboration across the entire supply chain, and it requires integrating cyber, operational, and reputational risk to shape the entire executive strategy.
We've really tracked this evolution, from the siloed fire inspector to the integrated city planner, from the purely technical expert to the trusted advisor and the foreign correspondent. This profound pivot ensures that the CISO is absolutely central to business resilience and sustainable growth in this hyper-volatile world. So thank you for joining this deep dive into the evolving world of cyber leadership and executive strategy.
And we again want to thank our sponsor, www.cisomarketplace.com.
And their offensive security arm, www.cisomarketplace.services, for supporting this understanding of how executive leadership is being redefined in the cyber age. Because understanding your risk is always the first step to a successful strategic partnership.
And here is a provocative thought for you to consider as you reflect on these insights. The ultimate measure of a CISO's success isn't the number of breaches they prevent, it's their capacity to embed security as a shared value throughout the entire organization, ensuring they are not the sole bearer of accountability and that risk ownership is actively and transparently shared across the entire enterprise.